Hi, Neil Lazarus here, and the time has come to talk about Jeremy Corbyn. I know there's a sense of feeling sick already, but if you have a look at what's going on in British politics, Labour's leader of opposition could well be the next Prime Minister. The British government at the moment is in absolute crisis over Brexit. Remember, Britain leaving Europe. Britain has to come to a deal by March 2019. And there is some serious discussion that Britain may be leaving Europe without any deal at all. What does that mean? It means that car export, immigration, what would happen at the airports, taxation, you name it, every form of action by a modern country would be in question. In one word, chaos. On the back of that, we have a government in Britain who is not able to come to a decision. The government is split. The Prime Minister is being challenged by her own government. And we could certainly see elections in the near future. Would the Conservatives get enough to have a majority or at least a hung parliament? Or would we be in a situation where the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, would have enough seats to form a majority? Now, again, this podcast is always dedicated to looking at the world and how it affects the Middle East and Israel and Jewish issues. So it's very difficult sometimes to comment on politicians from a foreign perspective. Look, for example, from an Israeli perspective, Trump is very popular. He's done a lot to support the state of Israel. Domestically, I can't really comment, but I'm very aware of some of the very real problematic issues he's created, both on race, sexism, a lack of tolerance, lack of liberalism, or liberal values at least. Respect to other genders and respect to transgender, so on and so forth. In the same way, I don't live in Britain anymore. I live in Israel. I don't suffer the effects of a bad national health service, which has been cut. I don't send kids to a British school system. I don't pay taxes in the UK. So, one level, maybe this podcast is unfair, but the reality is the record of anti-Semitism by Corbyn can't go uncommented. And the fact that all of the Jewish newspapers in Britain had a leading headline all on the same week calling Corbyn a racist and an anti-Semite shouldn't go uncommented. So what's the arguments about? What proof is there? You don't have to look too far to see a sordid record of anti-Semitic comparisons between, used by Jeremy Corbyn against Jews and Israel. Now, whoa, stop a second. I hear people saying, yeah, but you're allowed to criticize Israel. That's not anti-Semitic. I agree with you. But anti-Semitic criticism of Israel is. And here I think Jeremy Corbyn certainly steps over the line. And, in 2012, he peddled some conspiracy theory about Israel using a false flag operation in the Sinai Peninsula against the Egyptian army. I mean, that was the least of our problems. In 2010, he apologized for causing some form of concern and anxiety by hosting an event where Israeli policy was compared to Nazi policy. I mean, really? Really? At number 3, we could see, and this was very nicely documented by an article in the Post by Julianne Helmond on August the 27th, who did some great research listing some of the major problems. And I want to give credit where and reference where it's due. We also see a video emerging in 2013 of comparing Israel to Nazism. Perhaps even more famous, which spread over the world internationally, was on August the 12th, photos emerging of a 2014 wreath-laying ceremony at the graves of the terrorists who massacred 11 Israeli athletes. We also saw controversial pictures emerging in the same wreath-laying ceremony of a Tunisian terror chief, Maher al-Tahar, also with the wreath being laid with Corbyn present. We've seen over and over again the use of BDS, and in London rallies, Corbyn calling for a boycott of Israel. He's standing side by side with senior Hamas figures. Now, many of you may say, hold on, yeah, but these are political guys. But the reality is, Hamas are the people that put terrorists on buses and killed civilians. He accuses Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni of war crimes. He then talks about the Jewish media, keeps on going. But for me, personally, I think one of his most important statements, which was most reflective, was that he said that British Zionists were unable to understand a British way of thinking. Clearly, he said, and I quote, Zionists have two problems. One is they don't want to study history, and secondly, having lived in this country for a very long time, probably all their lives, they don't understand English irony either. They needed two lessons which we could perhaps help them with. What is that? Let's be honest. The Corbyn's use of lack of irony. Why is it so offensive? Because it questions the Britishness of Jews. It questions the Britishness of those people who have lived for many years in Britain, for 4 or 5 generations, and raises a question about their loyalty and their citizenship. Pure anti-Semitism. But the phenomena of anti-Semitism on the left is nothing new. We can go back to look at some of Jeremy Corbyn's friends and what's been going on in the Labour Party. First of all, we saw that MP Naz Shah and the former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, being suspended. Ms. Shah, was suspended over social media posts which suggested that Israelis should move to the United States, or rather that Israel should move to the United States. I think she apologised afterwards, but yeah, who's listening? Ken Livingstone, old Ken. Sorry, I just can't. This podcast is just like all these names. Isn't it new? Why is it? You get me on a rant here. Why is this a news story? Ken Livingstone, as someone who likes Jews, but it's all about Israel, and then comes up with some very questionable comments linking Hitler and Zionism. Now, many of you will probably be aware that the centre of the discussion in the British Labour Party was over the adoption of a working definition of anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, otherwise known as the IHRA. If you want to read it in full, and I'll make some references to it here, I want to refer you to the following website, www.holocaustremembrance.com/working definition anti-Semitism. www.holocaustremembrance.com working definition anti-Semitism. If you can't find it, I can email it to you, I suppose. That won't be a problem. Bottom line is the working definition of anti-Semitism by the IHRA reads the following. It says that it calls for the adoption of a non-legal binding working definition of anti-Semitism. Quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jews or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. To guide IHRA in its work, the following examples may serve as illustrations. Calling for, aiding, justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology or an extremist view or religion. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing or stereotypical allegations about Jews, as such of their power of Jews as collectively, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government or other societal institutions. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoings committed by a single Jewish person. In other words, you Jews did this when one person did. Denying the facts, scope, mechanism, e.g. gas chambers, or intentionally of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, the Holocaust. Accusing the Jews as a people, or Israel as a state, or inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nation. Ooh, is that a reference there to the irony comment? Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavour. They didn't like that one. Applying double standards by requiring of a behaviour not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. That whole double standard towards Israel. They weren't keen on that one either. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, for example, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis. Drawing comparison of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis and holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel. Hold on, this is a list. Reading it again, I read this a couple of weeks back and just reading it again for the podcast and for you listeners. Don't you get it? Let's try and count. Replay this. How many of these is Corbyn guilty of? I let you judge whether all of those were definitions of anti-Semitism, yes or no. I think they certainly are. Sometimes it's so much easier to use the word Zionist rather than Jew. The conclusion of the debate was a watered-down acceptance of this declaration by the IHRA. But what they added was the ability to have free speech. So they included a demand in this policy statement of free speech. In other words, that they could freely be anti-Semitic. So if someone is anti-Semitic and the IHRA says they're anti-Semitic, they can be defended on the use of the freedom of speech. You don't have the freedom of speech to be a racist. Sorry, that just ain't right. Anyway, I just thought I would fill you in a little bit on what's going on in Britain. I know, whenever I watch British politics, it reminds me of the last 10 minutes of the Titanic, the film The Titanic. A great thing in the Atlantic, sinking slowly, with everyone in denial, except for the working classes who are drowning. But this story does raise questions about what could happen, what would be. What would it be like to be a Jew in Britain under a Corbyn government? It's interesting that a recent poll showed that 40% of Jews in Britain were considering leaving if Corbyn became Prime Minister. Those are my rants for today. I hope you enjoyed or at least got some more information about what the whole Corbyn thing's about. And I know that most of my listeners are actually in the States. So sometimes it's difficult to follow other people's politics. So I thought I would discuss it a little bit with you. Second of all, we are working on a lot of stuff over Rosh Hashanah. I love this month. Rosh Hashanah is the month of the year. The summer is over, the winter isn't yet there, and I always reconsider, produce, edit, film. And so there's a lot of new material about to come out. Just a few sneaky things. One, if you're still listening to the end of this podcast, and I know I meant to say at the beginning, listen to the end, and then you listen all the way, but I didn't. So if you are listening, then you're genuinely interested, and I love you. And thank you very much for sending me lots and lots of emails. You guys were great on the podcast regarding being politically correct. I got loads of reading, lots of suggestions. People agreed, disagreed, suggested I read other stories. Amazing. So I'm interested to hear what you think about Jeremy Corbyn. Second of all, here's a sneaky offer for you for the end, which is my Middle East 101 course. In fact, all of my courses over Rosh Hashanah were offered with 75% off. That is now down, except for you guys. So if you put in the code New Year with a little dash thingy in capital letters onto my online courses, you get 75% off, which is seriously crazy. Now, I'm taking all of that advertising down, but if you're listening, you can still get it. Going to keep the code up just for you guys. So if you want online learning by me, it's there for the time being, at least. I'm going to leave it up there for about another month just for podcast listeners. So you can go into that. If you're interested in online learning with me, you can just go onto my website and you will find a link there. If you don't find it, just let me know. So those are the podcasts. If you haven't downloaded my app yet, please do. That's crazy if you haven't. It's free. It updates itself 24/7 with news from the Middle East. And finally, I am putting my travel schedule together for 2019. A lot of traveling, going to be on the road, speaking a lot. Would love to come and speak to you guys. You can get more information about some of the subjects I cover, but if you're listening, I think you know what I talk about. If by chance you can't or you don't, think you can organize it, but you maybe have a group of people, and you want something slightly, lower budget, lower key, but really good, I very much encourage you to do webcasting with me. Webcasting's amazing. I speak at the computer, I see them, I see my audience, wherever it may be, they see me, and we talk, and it's live. It's like having me in the classroom. We can do that as well. So, lots of stuff to think about. Let me know what you think about Corbyn. Do you agree with what I said, yes or no? You can contact me via my Twitter account at Awesome Seminars, or you can just through my website, awesomeseminars.com. To remember to download the app, which is free for more news, to at the same time make use of the New Year code, which gives you 75% off of all of my online courses, and to be in touch if you want to webcast or actually get me live to come and speak to you. That's it. I can't take any more of Jeremy Corbyn. He's one of the reasons why I live in Israel and left England. Bye.